The barroom was now full of the boarders who had been dropping in the night previous, and whom I had not as yet had a good look at. They were nearly all whalemen, chief mates and second mates and third mates, and sea carpenters and sea coopers and sea blacksmiths, and harpooneers and shipkeepers, a brown and brawny company with bosky beards, an unshorn, shaggy set, all wearing monkey jackets for morning gowns. You could pretty plainly tell how long each one had been ashore. This young fellow's healthy cheek is like a sun-toasted pear in hue, and would seem to smell almost as musky. He cannot have been 3 days landed from his Indian voyage. That man next him looks a few shades lighter, you might say a touch of satinwood is in him. In the complexion of a third still lingers a tropic tawn, but slightly bleached withal. He, doubtless, has tarried whole weeks ashore. But who could show a cheek like Queequeg, which, barred with various tints, seemed like the Andes' western slope, to show forth in one array, contrasting climates, zone by zone. "Grub ho!" now cried the landlord, flinging open a door, and in we went to breakfast.
So this should come out in 3 days' time. But today is Herman Melville's birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy Herman Melville.
Yeah.
Leo King.
So that's exciting. What else is going on in people's lives? You're touring, Johnny. How's touring going?
I am on tour, yes. On Herman Melville's birthday, we've just got to the end of our second week of the tour of 12th Night. It's going really well. We're really, really happy with it. It's a long tour. We started 2 weeks ago, and we run until the beginning of October. So it's a real kind of marathon tour, and the play itself is a bit of a marathon as well. Oh. It's a cast of 4 actors. And it's 12th Night, so as you know, much more than 4 characters in that particular play. I'm playing 5 and a bit characters. And so the whole thing it's quite a dance in the sense that you'll be there in a scene. And on some level, though you're trying to be present within a particular scene, you're also thinking, I know that in 30 seconds, I've got to be back on stage as a completely different character. And there are the kind of practical exigencies of that, which involve often taking off a piece of costume and putting on another one, taking off a waistcoat, putting on a policeman's hat, as I do at a certain point in the play. For anybody who needed any persuasion to come to one of the many venues
I'm
performing
sold.
at.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Me in a policeman's hat? Are you kidding?
I'm so there. Is 12th Night one of the ones with twins? Or is that when she is dressed like a boy? Many of the comedies have that.
It's both. It's a twin comedy, and it is also a cross-dressing comedy.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
all the heavy hitters in that one.
I know that it's a wonderful. It's the best version of playing the hits. You know, he combines just about everything that's worked in previous plays. And just spun it all together into pure gold. Wonderful. It's such a brilliant... This is the 5th time I've been in this play, and it will never, ever be enough.
That's so cool. Are you learning anything about the text, doing it so concentratedly over and over and over again, and then also doubling up roles that were already doubled up? Have you, learned about the genius in a deeper way?
Well... hearing the resonances between individual characters' voices is really, really fascinating. It's a play that is also wonderfully queer, and the language of adoration, the word adore comes up in really wonderful places, in the mouth of one of the characters who is widely acknowledged to be a queer character, Antonio, who rescues the male twin, Sebastian. And it seems as if they've had some kind of relationship while they've known each other for over a period of 3 months. And he goes to follow Sebastian into this new sort of chapter of his life. And he speaks these wonderful lines, "Come what may, I do adore thee so, that danger shall seem sport and I will go." And then it comes back, that word adore comes back later in the false letter that is written for Malvolio. One of the characters, Mariah, writes a letter, as I'm sure many listeners will know. She forges a letter from her boss to one of her colleagues, Malvolio, who's a real stick in the mud, this character that I'm playing, fooling him into thinking that Olivia is in love with him. And she writes this little poem, "I may command where I adore, but silenced like a lucre's knife with bloodless stroke my heart doth gore. And so that those lovely little semantic threads that run through the play and between characters that you wouldn't normally expect, that's a really, really exciting part of this particular production.
Yeah, I like when you can trace vocabulary like that throughout a work. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's
So
really wonderful.
I've got an embarrassing confession. So the only version of Twelfth Night that I've seen is the Amanda Bynes' She's the Man.
Why on earth would that be embarrassing?
That's incredible.
It's a fine and noble adaptation of the Shakespearean original. I won't hear a word said against
Amanda
it.
Bynes, yeah.
Friend of the pod, Amanda Bynes. Yeah, it's a peculiarly or perhaps surprisingly faithful adaptation of Twelfth Night. The college is called Illyria, and that's the name of the island that they get shipwrecked on. I think that the Orsino character, the love interest, is just called Duke. I don't think, if memory serves, they go as far as calling him Orsino. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
I'm gonna wear that Carolina blue. Yeah, baby.
Welcome to PequodPod, the podcast on the wonder world of Herman Melville. My name is Tristan.
I'm Meg.
And call me Johnny.
And today we're talking about The Breakfast. I am curious. What kind of breakfast what's your go-to breakfast? Let's start with Johnny.
Upon rereading this chapter, I think I need to throw out all of my existing breakfast plans in favor of coffee and hot rolls. Reading this chapter made me so hungry. It's nearly dinner time when we're recording in the UK at the minute, and just even looking at the phrase coffee and hot rolls now is just filling me with that early morning hunger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Fresh off the
I don't
oven.
know. I might
Yeah.
eschew those. I could go for some beefsteaks done rare.
well, and eaten most genteelly with a harpoon, I should think, Tristan.
Yeah. What about you, Meg? Are you a breakfast
Good,
person?
that's good. Unfortunately, my fantasy of breakfast and the reality of it, usually never the twain shall meet. My breakfasts are usually pretty lame, but my dream breakfast, which is usually eaten for dinner, I'm a big waffle person. I'm a big slap a fried egg on that. I like an eggs Benedict, but on waffles. I have to break with one of my heroes, Anthony Bourdain. He was not a fan of hollandaise sauce. But I was thinking about what's the best breakfast I've ever had, and I want to give a shout out to the best one that I can recall, which was an andouille sausage po' boy at the Screen Door East Side in Portland.
Very nice, very nice. I do also love hollandaise sauce. Eggs Benedict is probably my favorite breakfast. So I'm gonna, if we're throwing out, a place breakfasts we love. So every Sunday, me and my family go to the Silver Spoon in Durham, which is like this wonderful diner. It clearly used to be a Pizza Hut based on the building shape.
Incredible.
It's been bought and converted into the Silver Spoon. It's run by this very, very lovely Palestinian family. And they've got, they do a really good Eggs Benedict. They also do something called a country scramble, which is very similar to an Eggs Benedict, but like a little bit more. Like the one thing about an Eggs Benedict is I feel like I could probably eat two of like the normal portion sizes of Eggs Benedicts. You
could
get like
not agree more.
Jesus. Oh, cool.
But the country scramble, like it's got the hollandaise sauce and it's like a little bit more substantial. So if I'm very hungry, I get the country scramble from the Silver Spoon. If I'm a little less hungry, I'll get the Eggs Benedict. But wonderful spot, very nice people. If you're in Durham, North Carolina, definitely give it a shot. What about you, Johnny? You're from jolly old England, which is famous for its breakfast.
Do you do a full English?
Well, ordinarily at home, I'm a bit like you, Meg. I entertain the fantasy every weekend of, I'm going to get up nice and early. I'm going to put the coffee on. I'm going to do the tomatoes, the beans, the mushrooms, and the this and that and the other. Generally, that doesn't happen, and it's normally just a piece of toast or some porridge or whatever it is. Although I've been very, very lucky because while I've been on tour, I've mostly been staying in hotels, and particularly of a particular English brand of hotel called the Premier Inn. And the Premier Inn has a cooked breakfast every single morning. And for a modest sum of money, you can have unlimited full English breakfast items.
Wow.
Now, that I always view as a challenge, not an offer. So I've been going downstairs every single morning. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's like tunnel vision, guys. It really is. And I lock in. I mean, I didn't know quite how many hash browns I could fit within myself. Now I do. And it will be indecent of me to say on the pod exactly what that number is.
Right.
But it's more than
Suffice
you
it to
think.
say. Yeah.
Indeed. It was absolutely wonderful, especially finding particularly we were in the north of England this week, and we've been discovering that northern hoteliers in England are extremely generous with their portions. So you'll order what you. It's absolutely amazing. So I'm vegetarian, so I have sort of like sausage and bacon equivalents, like the sort of the meat replacement things. And we were in Prescott, where we opened at a lovely theatre called the Shakespeare North Playhouse in the northwest of England. And I ordered my fairly what I knew was going to be a fair bit of food, and the wonderful woman who served me came out with my veggie sausages and veggie bacon, and she sort of said, it looked like not very much bacon, so I got the chef to double this bacon for you. It was a huge pile of bacon, like half of that would have been a huge amount, honestly. And then so obviously I felt I was still full that evening, stepping on stage to do Shakespeare. It was marvelous,
as Shakespeare would have wanted.
With good capon lined. That's definitely how I felt or on every single one of those performance nights.
Yeah, the full English has always been kind of like fascinating to me. Like the hot tomato and the beans. The mushroom makes perfect sense to me, but the hot tomato and the beans were always kind of seemed like an odd aspect of it. But I understand it's basically it's a crucial aspect of a full English. Yes.
Well, if only because it's the only actual source of vitamins in the breakfast.
There you go.
Because the rest of it is just the brownest group of foods you could possibly imagine. I'm going to get lynched by my fellow Brits for suggesting
I think
that
you are
actually
supposed to have a colorful plate.
You are, and lots of veggie breakfasts actually they'll add a little bit of spinach in, but even that is considered sacrilege by some. I love it, but otherwise you
You're supposed to eat it and then go like build a bridge.
Yeah,
and so you need the starch and that's the limit of what I know about food. But like it's supposed to be like you go off and with your arms do something, not like sit in a bank like an industry. But times
absolutely.
Are changing.
It's like, it's just 400 hash browns. Oh, whoops! I've revealed the number. And then you go down the mines, or something like that. But now we're not as a society. We've retained the full English breakfast, but we've lost track of exactly what it was kind of for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think we've brought it back to Melville in a really interesting way.
I think
breakfast
we have.
Like as a ghost of the industrialized past, even though we aren't industrialized in that same way, but like the food retains the shadow of what we used to use it for.
No, I think that's totally right.
The beautiful reliability with which you can draw us back to the text at hand, Meg. It never ceases to amaze me. Well done.
Okay, yeah. So, like, getting to our chapter, Meg, you do these really wonderful recaps of our chapters. Do you want to give this one a go?
Yeah. So the breakfast is we're coming on or off hot off the tails of Queequeg left the room at the end of Counterpane, and breakfast picks right off there where Ishmael basically gets dressed and follows him into the bar room, where the rest of the tenants in the house have gathered. Like old school landlords don't do this anymore, but like you used to like stay in like the big house, and they would make you breakfast in the morning, as you and I might do now in like a B&B. They're waiting for the landlord to serve breakfast. Ishmael reflects on the fact that he harbors no bitterness towards Peter Coffin, despite what he calls Peter Coffin's skylarking, regards to sort of like the goofiness of getting him into bed with Queequeg. And then there's this very sweet paragraph where Ishmael observes basically that it's kind of better for all of humanity to be able to take a joke, that's kind of a skill that you should cultivate. He also observes amongst the whalemen, again, this thing that we talked about weeks ago, which is that he equates or he reports an equivalence between browner skin with having been on a whale ship longer, which he equates with competency. So he sort of, that pops up again, and then he says, no one shows a cheek like Queequeg. Then breakfast is finally served, which is great. And then something strange happens, which is that Ishmael is like, I'm so ready to hear all their crazy whaling stories. I'm getting into whaling mode, whale mode activated. But then no one talks to each other. And he says, actually, the silence seems embarrassed, and this seems strange to him. So he kind of sits there. Queequeg is like reaching across the table with his spear to like get a steak. And Ishmael is like, well, I'll leave him to a smoke. And then he walks outside.
Love it. No, that's wonderful. Okay, Johnny, what are your first impressions of this chapter?
I love, first of all, the contrast that we get between this group of sailors here compared to how they were described when they first arrived at the Spouter Inn. I love that they are formally described as an eruption of bears, and here they have been tamed back into a group of bashful bears. And the incredible contrast that is implied as part of that between the land and the sea. This is something that we have spoken about a great deal before, and the kind of the land boundedness of these chapters and the way that that's articulated. But these are people who have been so shaped by their existence at sea that it becomes completely inseparable from who they are, and that they seem to become these slightly more subdued personalities when they are not in that place, which has more or less become their home. One of the ways I think in that's articulated is this incredible section where we get the list of professions. Let me see if I can quickly lay hands on it. Yeah, here we are. They were nearly all whalemen, chief mates and second mates and third mates and sea carpenters and sea coopers and sea blacksmiths and harpooneers and shipkeepers, a brown and brawny company with bosky beards. On the one hand, I think it's really funny that you can effectively just choose any profession from the land and just put sea in front of it, and you just become that version of that at sea.
Yes, a sea barista.
A sea barista.
Yeah, it's whatever.
Sea plumber. Sea ballerina, we have to assume.
Don't forget them, yeah.
No, absolutely. They're essential to a whaling voyage. And that on the one hand, of course, I find that very funny and quite silly as an idea. But on the other hand, I think it casts a really interesting light on the necessity of these earthbound professions while human beings are at sea. A ship, after all, being a kind of an artificial land that requires maintenance in order for it to be a habitable place. And that's something that I think comes across really, really beautifully as part of the figuration of these seamen on land.
No, I love that. It is a very interesting contrast. One of my alternative readings, I'd say this is a second reading from what I think the reading you have, which I think makes a lot of sense, the subduedness of being on land, of tarrying on shore, and how that seems to suck something out of the sailor. My other thought is, are these guys really hungover? Because they were having quite the bender before.
The New England measures were flowing, weren't they?
They sucked
the Cape
deep
Horns,
from the Cape Horns, yeah, for sure.
I think that's. I don't think those two interpretations are mutually exclusive, Tristan, at all. No.
They need an eggs Benedict.
They do.
Perhaps apocryphally created as a hangover cure. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So at the very beginning of this chapter, we get what Meg, you were talking about before, which is this re-encounter with Peter Coffin, in which he's he's still got his grin on from before. What do we think about Ishmael's, I would say, very mature reaction to Peter Coffin's skylarking? What do you think, Meg?
I think this is interesting. The breakfast and the street, which we'll get to, are both in what we would call summary, not scene. There's one thing when the landlord speaks when he's like, breakfast is ready. That's in scene. But everything else is is summarized, some sort of God's eye. And we get kind of a lot of places where you can tell it's present day Ishmael or storytelling Ishmael. And I think this is an interesting paragraph in that... is this what young Ishmael was thinking at the time, or is this sort of the narrativizing present-day Ishmael saying, looking back, I was glad that I didn't make a fuss about it the next day because it would have been unsporting. But I do think this is sweet as a place where we can see some of the values of our narrator. The idea that, again, we are, believe it or not, still in the early pages of this book. We still are learning about what are his values, what kind of personality does he have. And it's sweet, I think, coming off of the previous couple of chapters where he was so full of anxiety that now amongst people, he would use the word civilized, but it seems like he does sort of have a sense of like good sportingness and like it's okay to kind of be laughed at, like shrug it off for the good of the group. Turns out my roommate's a nice guy. I hope to hear these people's stories. Like he seems like, as we perhaps predicted, perfectly capable of getting along in kind of a group of quasi-strangers. I think the lesson of this paragraph, which is, if you can laugh about something, you're set up well for the rest of your life, shows us something kind about our narrator that he didn't necessarily have to have.
Yeah, and I think also, like, even if Peter Coffin intends this forcing together, like this forced proximity between Ishmael and Queequeg as like a joke that he's like constantly laughing to himself about. Ishmael's best night of sleep of his life is a product of this, right? Even if Peter Coffin's intentions may be a little bit more selfish in a sense, or to get a laugh out of this, it's such an impactful meeting for Ishmael that I feel like it makes sense that like he cherishes no ill will towards Peter Coffin.
Yeah. If you sleep well, you're untouchable. And he's clearly got the advantage over, or it seems like he has an advantage over all of these very hungover.
Bashful bears.
Yeah.
The bashful bears. You two have really persuaded me on that because I had come kind of keyed up with a slightly different approach to that passage.
I want to hear it still. Yeah.
And I almost got the sense that Ishmael was protesting a little bit too much, a little bit like in that previous conversation with Peter Coffin when he says, "Look, I'm not green. Don't think me green. I've done this before. I've got experience and all that kind of thing." That's definitely what's happening. He's trying desperately to kind of keep face. But I now, based on what you two have been saying, I think that's too cynical a way of reading that paragraph. It could be the case that you can find that train of thought in the Ishmael to whom the events of the narrative have just been happening. But I really, really like that reading of a more reflective Ishmael, and that, actually, this is a better way to be. And that actually it's actually a much more positive thing than I had perhaps thought it was before.
Mm-hmm. It could, I mean, I think your reading is interesting. The thrust of it all is that we're seeing Ishmael in a social situation really for one of the first times, and learning about he had protested so much about being in one, now he's in one, and so now we have to learn things. This could have been a chapter where he, backhands Coffin and is like, why'd you do it? Like this could be an Ishmael who there were so many other options, but instead Melville was like, he's going to be cool and hopes to get along and make new friends. So for whatever interpretation we want to put on it, that's the evidence given.
Definitely.
Yeah, and also sometimes like the thing that is maybe more enlightened and morally good, especially if it like conforms with self-interest as well. Like the two things, like those two motivations can like coexist at the same time, or it can be easier.
I think they can,
it can be easier to have the like more enlightened position, especially if it like is like rewarding in a sense. Like let's say he didn't have a good night's sleep and it was horrible, but he still wanted to not seem like a green like whaler or whatever. He could still have had that same reaction to Peter Coffin, but in order to like kind of protect his ego or whatever. But like the kind of the confluence of the two, the confluence of those readings, like and the confluence of those motivations, I think results in this behavior.
Yeah.
Certainly. And I think that what you've just hit on there, Tristan, speaks to something that we are already discovering and that we'll continue to discover with our reading of Moby-Dick, that seemingly polarized readings can actually both be true. like
Yeah.
multiple readings of given things can be active at once. And that's something that I think we've already seen Melville start to include as an element, but actually also to thematize as well with those, like we come back to the boggy, soggy, squidgy picture, which kind of is able to be all of those things that he suggests that it is in a certain way.
Yeah. No, I like that. Like kind of like a superpositionality. Yeah.
Oh God! Oh my goodness! Yeah, what a word! Yeah, fantastic.
Moving on a bit to like the next part of that paragraph. What do we think about Ishmael's philosophy of being the butt of a joke?
I think it's important to know what is bountifully laughable about oneself.
Yeah. I'm kind of pompous.
Self-aware
and-
king. It's a social grace for sure. I think it's a skill that you can get better at. What I really like about this paragraph, and I'm just sort of just seeing it now, is Tristan. It reads like Christ would talk. Think of this in Christ voice.
Okay, let's hear it.
So if any one man in his own proper person affords stuff for a good joke to anybody, let him not be backward, but let him cheerfully allow himself to spend and be spent in that way. And the
Yeah, it
man
sounds
that
like it
has
could come
anything
from
bountifully laughable about him, etc. Yeah, that sounds like something that like Father Mike would say at the thing, on like a Sunday, church. Yeah, I think just the way the rhetoric of that makes it sound like English translated the King James Bible. I think that's funny.
Yeah, it's got like a Sermon on the Mount sort of feel to it. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we've got our barroom full of boarders. They're all hung over, and I think one of the most like interesting for like a lot of different reasons, like from like an ideology of race perspective, from an ideology of like what it means to be a sailor perspective. This paragraph about the young fellow's healthy cheek is like a sun-toasted pear in June, and like all these very vivid descriptions of basically complexion and how complexion relates to like basically lack of complexion is an indication of lack of nautical skill.
I think it's flawed logic, and I think it's a logic that reveals itself to be flawed in the wonderfully kind of diverse community that we get on the Pequod, and the deliberately diverse profile of people that we see aboard the ship, which extend to children, as we find out, but also I'm thinking specifically of a young boy called Pip, who is very distinctive in the way that he is marked racially. He is a non-white character, but he nonetheless is a character who is, in the text zone terms, makes him a kind of a green character. He's very, very new to the world of whaling.
True.
And yet we've got characters who are very, very clearly more coded as white, who are very, very experienced. So I think it's an interesting working theory that Ishmael comes up with prior to his first whaling voyage. Again, I think this very much comes from the pre-voyage Ishmael rather than from the narrating Ishmael.
Interesting.
And my sense here is that it's probably a theory that is set up to be revealed as largely untrue as the text progresses. Though I'm aware that there may be differing opinions on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think. Yeah. What do you got, Meg?
Well, I'm thinking, it's so there's so much here. Look at this full plate. For sure, I think, a couple of things are happening, which is that one, I think he's telling us something that just is maybe physically true to light-skinned people, which is that on a boat you're going to tan, and then when you come on shore and you can go inside more, if you are naturally paler, you will lose the tan. Sure. But I think something that's sort of, as I think about, especially with the end of, is it the end of the chapter? No, it's the end of the street when we start to talk about ladies. We're in a society that I think is still, that's going to sound stupid. It's obviously prioritizing paleness, but like even like white women are trying to use paleness as what? A class indicator. I don't have to work. I can stay inside. I've got my huge nails on. I have been thinking about class so much for like 2 weeks with these huge nails, which I can't do anything in them, but I look beautiful. I'm like, wow, I can't open a can. And then I snap my fingers and, what's his name from The Fresh Prince comes in and does it for me because I have a butler. But in any case, like this is showing maybe kind of as we were talking about last chapters, like Ishmael is starting to learn what the whaling ship culture is like, as opposed to whatever he was doing before. And he's saying, so for my reader, you actually want to prioritize getting tan and getting browner, because that means that you are working, and this is a book about working. So it might be Ishmael starting to kind of reroute. It's interesting because the paragraph doesn't show him realizing this. Rather he's giving it to us like gospel. This is something that that does happen, not something that's dawning on him in real time. But it is necessary. It is still something that he specifies. So we take the time to show all these really lovely sort of like simile and like the pear, and you're like, ooh, say more about the pear-hued man who smells musky. Like, let's go. And no one shows a cheek like Queequeg. So maybe the whole thing is really just about Queequeg, and he just like wants to find a new way to talk about him. I think that's
as a counterpoint that's just come to mind when we're thinking about the kind of the premium or the kind of prestige that's attached to the altering of one's complexion. This kind of conversation cannot but make me think of Persuasion by Jane Austen, where we get which is a very, very naval novel. Lots of the cast in that novel are sailors, captains and admirals and all that kind of thing. And then within that society, you've got this gloriously and terribly foppish and arrogant and vain man, Sir Walter Elliot, who is the kind of the patriarch of the of an aristocratic family, and he's the father of the protagonist, and he is so anti sailors, and that's partly because, in his own words, the Navy brings people of obscure birth into undue distinction, but also because, in his view, it makes them look a certain way. It makes them look uncivilized.
Yes, So that,
He says that being a sailor cuts up a man's youth and vigor most horribly. A sailor grows old sooner than any other man. And then we get a description of a sailor, somebody called Admiral Baldwin. And it sounds remarkably like some of the characters that Ishmael sees here. So I just pulled up the passage. What does he say? The most deplorable-looking personage you can imagine. His face the colour of mahogany, rough and rugged to the last degree, all lines and wrinkles, 9 grey hairs of a side, and nothing but a dab of powder at top. And that's and that's the most horrendous thing that Sir Walter can possibly imagine.
Oh, what a guy. Yeah, so the sea becomes this place where the sort of uncomfortable, translation is possible between like some potentially, white person could kind of become de-racialized or quasi-racialized from that Walter Elliot perspective. Or maybe even something that earlier Ishmael would have worried about, where you could start to be like, well, is that person white? And the anxiety there is too much for these land people.
Yeah, but both texts though speak to the life at sea as something of a social leveler, because the other part of Walter's anxiety is, hang on, well, why are all of these nobodies getting titles like captain and admiral? Like they're not aristocracy, they're not baronets as he is, and he's incredibly anxious about that. Whereas actually that's something that becomes a very, very positive thing in Moby-Dick, right? The sea and the profession of whaling as an incredible kind of leveling thing in terms of class, but also as we're discovering more and more in terms of race as well.
I find this last sentence of this paragraph very interesting. So, like, who could show a cheek like Queequeg, which barred with various tints seems like the Andes' western slope, to show forth in one array contrasting climates zone by zone. And to me, like, here we have another like Ishmael, like, understanding the world through Queequeg's body, and very specifically, like, Queequeg's body becomes like the world, like this section of this continent.
It's another really interesting precursor to Queequeg's tattooed body is containing a complete theory of the heavens and the earth. Here we are still very much kind of land-based. We've got the Andes here. There's a reference to the Cretan labyrinth in a previous chapter, isn't there, as well? Interesting that that's mythological rather than topographical or geographical in any sort of objective sense. But yeah, it's another really, really fascinating continuation of this kind of topographical exploration of Queequeg, as well as the affective relationship that takes shape between Queequeg and Ishmael here, and also in earlier chapters, and as the text moves forward.
I think it's also just a sort of an interesting another way where this podcast is so spread out, but again, we really have just met this guy, and it's worth sort of saying that Ishmael is still like, oh, no one has outranked him for tattoos. He's still like the craziest looking guy here. And for Ishmael, that being, physical appearance now starting to be kind of what the book is going to be about, for what can I plumb the depths from the outside. Queequeg is still the most interesting exterior. He sits at the head of the table, so it chanced, cool as an icicle, which I think is awesome. So it's still like Ishmael has so much to say about the room, but still no one can hold a candle to his roommate. I think maybe he's thinking a little bit of pride of like, yeah, that's my friend.
Yeah,
we slept
I think
together,
you're right.
and it was awesome. If someone had spoken to him, that's what he would say.
Yeah.
None of these men with their bosky beards can compete.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Interestingly, on the word bosky, I went down a little rabbit hole on this, and the earliest attestation of the word bosky, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is in Shakespeare. And it comes from The Tempest.
Let's go. Does it mean like foresty kind of?
It absolutely does.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Did Shakespeare make up that word? Is that a Shakespeare word? Or the first earliest recording is Shakespeare
It's
then?
the earliest recorded use of the word bosky. Whether he invented it or not is...
I guess it's kind of
What a
like
guy. What a guy.
Didn't invent the word bosque, but the adjective, certainly.
Well, he did a lot of that. Like he would add an "un" to a word, and then that caught on like wildfire. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Including the word skyey, which comes up somewhere, like meaning sky-like, which I think is just wonderful.
Sky. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Okay, so grub ho now, cried the landlord, flinging open a door, and then we went to breakfast. So we've got breakfast now. We've got our hot rolls, and we've got the best of pea coffee. What do you think? So like we talked about a little bit, we have this interesting chapter here, which is full of some interesting references. Did y'all do any digging on these Ledyard and Mungo Parks?
They are late 18th century explorers. That's all I've got.
Yes. I go to Power Moby-Dick basically for all of my references. So Ledyard was with James Cook, who went to Hawaii. Not the first person there. I think he was duly killed somewhere, which is probably good. And then Mungo Park is a Scottish guy in Africa, obviously. So our question is like, what's up with using these real life explorers as sort of an analogy to anything in this space?
Yeah, so Ledyard, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce this. I'm going to go with Ledyard. So I've found that he wrote the first travelogue about Hawaii, which I think would be is relevant to Melville, because like his earliest works are sort of travelogue-ish.
Travelogues, yeah, as a genre,
and we do know that like Melville like read a lot of like other people's kind of travelogues, especially like as it relates to like Polynesia, to like inform parts of his early books. He doesn't seem to like hold him in terribly high esteem, at least as it relates to high social polish. We do get an interesting, like very racialized indication of Mungo Park's achievements, namely taking a long solitary walk on an empty stomach in the Negro heart of Africa, which was the sum of poor Mungo's performances.
I mean, it seems that what this is doing, at least in part, is furthering that sense of, okay, here are these objective historical things that happened.
Yeah.
And here is a way in which my world that I'm creating is in some way going to surpass that. We spoke about this a great deal when we spoke about the extracts, but also in earlier chapters when we get fictional people and places set alongside real people and places as figures of authority and that kind of thing. And so I think it's interesting in as much as it introduces and underlines the research that Melville has done and the kind of quote-unquote authority that comes with that.
Yes,
but
ethos.
Also that, exactly, yeah, the ethos of the entire text, but also the sense in which Melville is quite consciously going beyond these previous accounts of what's come before. And Owen Chase is another great example of that, right? Here's this thing that happened. Here's this historical account that I'm anchoring my narrative in, and you as my reader need to have these things in your mind, if only to be aware of how I'm actually in some way surpassing these narratives with my fiction, but that is also very strongly undergirded by reality.
Yeah. Here's a question. Do you think Ishmael, I think probably here the Ishmael who's recounting the tale would view himself as being like these two, or do you think he views himself as having like somewhat of a high social polish?
It's interesting because he's setting these guys up as, even though they did all these things, they're socially awkward, which Ishmael has not really proved himself to be. We've seen him do he was freaking out about Queequeg, but that was kind of a weird situation. He seems to, as we were saying on just the previous page, place a high premium on ease and sociability and kind of go with the flowness. And he's saying, despite these guys, this is a funny paragraph. They say that men who have seen the world thereby become quite at ease in manner, quite self-possessed in company. Like you would imagine, some sort of Victorian gentleman becomes great in the parlor, has all these stories, very articulate, very urbane, charming by having been so cosmopolitan. But then he gives us these two examples as counter arguments and says, well, these guys did these crazy things, but that being alone in the sled dog doesn't actually make you better a dinner companion. But then at the end of the paragraph is like, but mostly it does. But then the next paragraph is, but these guys weren't talking. So it's this weird like argument, counter argument, argument, counter argument to set up the ultimate point, which is it was weird to me that these whalemen had nothing to say at breakfast. And to come to that point by way of these two real examples of men who did these crazy things but weren't transformed into like better social creatures is interesting, in that Ishmael is maybe like, is this going to happen to me? Are these good examples? Interesting questions. When we're thinking about civilization living alongside the uncivilized whalers in this town and this whaling town thrust together.
Yeah, to pursue that a little bit further, and this time to take a step outside the book and thinking about Melville himself. He's kind of a case where like having gone on a weird, crazy trip is what had this effect on him, right? But before he started writing down his stories, he would recount them to people like at like kind of parties or get-togethers and stuff. And like it was through that experience of like retelling his own experiences out in Polynesia that he was like basically decided to like start writing these sorts of things down, and being like this like famous as the man who lived among the cannibals. Did have like a notably like big effect on like his social standing. He's coming from like a very socially like downwardly mobile family, and he ends up marrying the daughter of the Chief Justice of Massachusetts, if I'm remembering correctly. Like he does have this like big jump up in social status through this process, and so like it's interesting in my mind for his Ishmael to like point out that that's not always the case, especially when it's something that like would have been like very personally like relevant to Melville.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, particularly because there is evidence that Melville further on in his life sort of overplayed the extent to which he was involved on the whaling voyages that he was on. I believe I'm right in saying there is at least one letter in which he claims to have been a harpooner, and we know that he never was. So, I absolutely see what you mean, Tristan, but there is also a sense, in the same way, actually, that Ishmael really, as we already started seeing, he started kind of co-opting the identity of whaleman. There is absolutely a sense that Melville does a little bit of that. And a lot of that is completely justified in Melville's case, and it becomes very, very justified in Ishmael's case. But at the same time, I think there is still a slight biographical... there's a similarity there biographically between us, with a slight tendency on the parts of both of them to potentially kind of overstate their cases when it comes to the prestige of being on a whaling voyage.
Makes sense, though. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like a fascinating way to like wrap up this like a digression, like or this paragraph is still for the most part that sort of thing is to be had anywhere in relation to high social polish, which I think is like an interesting way to like wrap that up and like sort of cast it aside in a sense. And I think like in a sense he's right. You know, you don't have to do all these crazy things to be good in a parlor.
Yeah, and to be crazy things doesn't necessarily guarantee you being good in a parlor. But then is being good in a parlor important? Because we're not in a, it's not a book about the parlor. It's a book about the whale ship. Or you could say the parlor changes to the whale ship.
Yeah, so they're all seated at the table. There's no good stories. Everybody's in a profound silence. In my mind, they're very hungover. But even if they're not hung, or you know, in addition to that, they look embarrassed. It's interesting to me that they they have this embarrassed sort of silence, and you could, in my mind, you could imagine Ishmael like having that, like especially like thinking about his encounter, thinking about like the, like homoeroticism related to his encounter of the previous night. Like you could, I think it's like especially like maybe somebody that wasn't Ishmael in kind of a similar sort of situation might have like this sense of embarrassness the next morning. Ishmael doesn't seem to have this. He seems to be eager to like now that like he has had like this instance of like contact or instance of like being a social being again, right? As it relates to Queequeg, it seems like he's like his cocoon has hatched and he's ready to be like this social butterfly now, to be like a whaleman amongst the whalemen, but like he's not getting that now that he's ready to like seek out that sort of social interaction. It's not being reciprocated, where it's like it's just this embarrassed silence.
But it's interesting, and it probably speaks a little bit to Ishmael's greenness at this stage in the narrative, that he's expecting every conversation that these whalemen have to be about whaling. Why would they be? Surely they would want to talk about absolutely anything else. It's like it reminds me inescapably of this great story that Miriam Margolyes tells about when she was in a play with Maggie Smith and Judi Dench, and they were all sat in the green room for a really early performance, and Margolyes was there, and she just didn't really know what to say to these kind of two theatrical greats. Margolyes, of course, is a great sort of an acting great, but she probably wasn't at the time, you know, when at the same time that Maggie Smith and Judi Dench were. And apparently she just sat there, and at one point Maggie Smith was doing a crossword, and I think Judi Dench was knitting, and she just said, "Shall we talk about acting?" Maggie Smith just sort of looked up from her crossword at Miriam Margolyes and just says, "Oh no, let's not."
Oh my God, dream blunt rotation, absolutely. Of
course,
that's funny. Yeah.
And so that's what I imagine. It's the whaling equivalent of that. And so what I'm saying is that Ishmael is being played by Miriam Margolyes in this chapter.
Absolutely, she could do it.
Oh, she could, and I think she should. Our people will talk to her people.
Good, that's great. Well, let's get this cooking.
So one of the I'm gonna mine you two for what the correct literary motif is, because I don't always remember the correct literary motif names. But he talks about the Green Mountains all the time. I think he loves the Green Mountains as like as a symbol of greenness, right? You know, like that's where you come from if you're like an idiot as it relates to all things nautical, who hasn't ever done anything. You're from the Green Mountains of Vermont. And we've got this sentence here. So they're looking around sheepishly at each other as though they had never been out of sight of some sheepfold among the Green Mountains. A curious sight, these bashful bears, these timid warrior whalemen. I personally love like being able to, like in the geography of America, like identify, like have this like a location that like has this that's evocative for Melville in this way, as like a typifying this kind of person. And it's also like inland too, right? You know, Vermont's not coastal.
I suppose it's a connotation, isn't it, between greenness and newness, and sort of allowing that to spill out into the inland world. I think that will probably be my best stab at sort of putting a pin in exactly what it is that's going on there from a literary technique perspective. Meg may have some advances on that.
Well, I was just thinking sort of from like a creative writing standpoint, always the more specific you can go, the funnier it is. It's the opposite to say that, oh, just go universal, go broad. That's the thing that everyone can relate to. The smaller your pin can be, actually, the more universal that feels. And you were talking earlier, Johnny, about the ethos of the text for him to be able to name real explorers. From the point from Ishmael as storytelling tool, for him to be able to say, oh, if you're from the Green Mountains, you're a fool. That may or not be true, and probably the men from the Green Mountains wouldn't appreciate that. But for us to be able to say, oh, in this world, Ishmael thinks of this region as being backwoods Hicks, gives us a sense of his world, the sort of regional competition and the way that, you know, two high schools that are close together would hate each other, and what all the different smaller and smaller and smaller regionalisms of New England would think about each other. Like, you know, maybe he's from New Hampshire and he just hates all Vermonters, or he's from like Maine and thinks everyone south is whatever. So I think maybe I don't know what it means to be of the Green Mountains, but from reading the paragraph, it makes me sound like Ishmael knows of the region, that he has opinions. He seems like a realer person. The place seems like a realer place.
Yeah. I do think he like just loves that the color name is there, and like, you know, greenness being his. So
it could be that simple. It just has green in the name.
Yeah. Moving forward, we get this description of Queequeg and his coolness.
He's so cool. Oh my God.
He is so cool.
And another parallel to being unruffleable as a social skill. To do anything coolly is to do it genteelly. So again, it seems like this is of high value to Ishmael, and that may be moving from sort of being able to charm ladies in the parlor room, and it's moving to being able to work in a whaleboat. But whatever genteel means is still very important to him. So Ishmael is using a harpoon, which he's like, that's rude. But you know what? He did it with style, and that's what's important to Ishmael. And we can still see that Queequeg is still rising ever higher in his esteem for his ability to kind of just be like unruffled and like, this is how I eat breakfast. And Ishmael is like, wow, he's so cool.
No, I think that's all absolutely true. And I think it's interesting that description is prefaced with that, in theory, hypothetical clause. His greatest admirer could not have cordially justified his bringing his harpoon into breakfast with him. Well, who is his greatest admirer at this point? It's already Ishmael. And so it's billed as something that's this kind of hypothetical. Oh well, you know, even if you, the person who sort of admired him the most in the world couldn't attempt to do this. Well, it's so obvious at this point that it's. Even though Ishmael cannot necessarily justify, he still can't help but notice, as his greatest admirer, that this is incredibly coolly done.
The next sentence does that. And he does it in the next paragraph, too. We won't speak of all the weird things about him. And then he lists some of the weird things about him. Okay, what do we have time for here, Ishmael? You're in charge.
Yes, exactly.
No, I love I love that sentence. I love like the ambiguities there. Yeah, like kind of the like a self-contradictory nature of the statement, like to say, we will not speak of all of Queequeg's peculiarities here, how he eschewed coffee and hot rolls and applied his undivided attention to beefsteaks done rare. It's such a weird sentence to me, because it in saying what he's not going to do, he says what he does it. He does it.
For all the literary terminology junkies out there, this is called paralypsis. It's the act of saying something by saying you're not going to say it.
I love that.
Happens. I mean, my goodness. Now that I've put that out there, you'll start hearing it all the time in political rhetoric. Yeah. Right. I will not say that the honourable member is this, or I do not care to mention. I would never call this person
an idiot, but I can't believe he did that. Yeah,
it's exactly that. It's
exactly that.
Super.
Use it all
common.
the time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So Queequeg eschews the coffee and the hot rolls. And applies his undivided attention to beefsteaks done rare. I found this to be like an interesting detail, which is like we get this like a couple of times. We also get mention of this in the Spouter Inn, where Peter Coffin's describing like Queequeg's like culinary taste in a sense, and the idea of like the beefsteak done rare as being like indicative in some way of like cannibalness, or like, of course a cannibal wants a beefsteak done rare. Now beefsteak is not human meat, and I would imagine also that if you were to actually eat human meat, you would definitely not want to eat it rare, right? I feel like that you're opening yourself up to some parasites or something if you do that. But what do we make of like rareness and like the like meat specifically as like being like an indicator of like Queequeg's identity?
I think there's definitely something to be said for the fact that red meat done rare is going to have quite a lot of kind of juice and potentially blood still visible within it. I've been a herbivore for quite a few years now, so that's a dim and distant memory, really. So from a purely visual point of view, as it were, I can kind of see why that comparison might be evocative of like a bleeding piece of flesh. I don't know. I'll defer to I'll defer to you guys and your potentially better judgments on that.
Meg, do you eat meat? I think you said you did, right?
I do, for sure. Yeah, I'm as all civilized people now are, a medium rare steak eater. Yes. No.
Why on earth I jumped in then as the podcast token vegetarian? I don't know why.
We, like we're, illuminating things through its opposites.
Yes.
Clearly
it
a
all
really
links up.
useful tool. Yeah, it's really useful. But I mean, I think it's, just thinking about, perhaps this is a world where meat was cooked to death, or it was like boiled. And from Queequeg's point of view, this is the best way to eat it. I would agree with him. Maybe I couldn't be able to handle the harpoon to spear it and bring it to my plate, but like I would be with him in that corner eating the steaks. For breakfast, that's strong. That might be a lot on the tummy for the first thing you eat at like presumably like 7 or 8 in the morning. But yeah, the my sort of stereotype of the sort of Dickensian meat slop does not seem more delicious. But again, as we've been saying, what is this as a storytelling tool to tell us about Queequeg? I think we're supposed to think like the meat is really bloody. He doesn't cook it because he's bizarre, and they don't cook meat, which is obviously not true. Like, yeah, if you were eating a person, the cooking montages on Hannibal were beautiful. He cooked that stuff to death. It was lovely. So it's not, if you look at it too closely, you're like, cannibalism doesn't really have any analogy to rawness of meat or rareness. But I think very superficially, I think it's pretty easy that you can just be like, yes, the rareness of the meat is how different is Queequeg from his eating habits, because the other guys would be tossing it on the fire for longer.
Yeah, two things on this before we move on. One, just to put a pin in it, because we should talk about it more when we get to it later. But in Stubbs' supper, specifically, he like wants the cook, like he's mad at the cook for cooking his whale steak far too long, and he tells the cook, next time just hold up a live coal to meat for like a second and then give it to me. He wants it as rare as possible. And in that chapter, Stubb really has this like. There's like a real like animalistic sort of barbarism to Stubb.
Yeah.
So I think this is something we'll trace later. We'll talk more about that.
Stubb is not right about much, but he was right about that. Just get it warm, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And then two, so to put my Jesus hat back on, in Acts. And so this is something.
Is that a crown of thorns? What does
could
the
be.
Jesus hat look like? Yeah.
What does the Jesus hat look like? I'm gonna have to get a real Jesus hat. I'm gonna put it
we've
on.
We've already had listeners producing art for the pod. I mean, anybody who wants to make some fan art of the Jesus hat or the Shakespeare hat, write
send
in
it our way.
Yeah, send it to
our DMs are open.
They are.
But like I can't, from like a biblical point of view, so basically, like if you like take the New Testament seriously, I don't know why Christians eat steak that still has blood in it, or like rare steak. Because in Acts, basically in Acts, they say, okay, forget pretty much all of the restrictions on like eating different things. You can eat shrimp or whatever. Like forget all the stuff that's from the Old Testament, except 4 of these things. There's 4 rules from the Old Testament you still have to stick with, and one of them is not eating meat that has blood in it. And there's nothing else in the New Testament that I'm aware of that like contradicts that. But for whatever reasons, it's something that I don't know any Christians that like hold to that hey, this is definitely still in the New Testament. This isn't even Old Testament stuff. This is in the New Testament. We're not supposed to eat meat with blood in it. I don't know any Christians that stick to that.
Interesting.
If you're a Christian, listen to the show and don't eat meat with blood in it because of this prescription. Hit the DMs,
please. What's going on there?
Fan art and biblical clarification is really
we need a lot of help.
That's what our DMs are for, really.
Yeah. So wrapping up, is there anything else that y'all wanted to bring up about this chapter? I do know that we wanted to. I heard your inhalation. Do you have
my
something
excited intake of breath? No,
yeah, let's hear it.
Well, we've been talking a lot about the kind of the animalistic vocabulary that permeates the chapter. We've spoken about the bashful bears and various other kind of physical ways in which the sailors are described. I can't let this chapter go by without mentioning that this is the only time in Moby-Dick that the phrase sea dog is used.
Oh.
Now, I, for one, didn't know. I didn't know that sea dog was originally used as a name for a harbour seal. Oh. And so it's interesting whether or not Melville is tapping into that, but the fact that he's explicitly using this name, which equates the sailors with a creature, with a mammal of the sea, though of course not a whale. I'm also interested in whether or not it's because it's a phrase that's used here very conspicuously, but then never again. In that sense, while we're using literary terms, it's a hapax legomena. It's a hapax legomenon, I should say. No, wait, which is the singular? Hapax legomenon is the singular, and hapax legomena is the plural.
I believe
hapax legomenon. There we go.
Yep.
Must get my Greek correct. And so I'm interested in that because. Is it a phrase that one would typically use of a seaman on a whale ship? Or is it something that is potentially already slightly outdated as a term when Ishmael is applying it as the Ishmael who is witnessing this scene? Is he actually using a phrase that is already slightly outdated to talk about this kind of person? And then as the narrative goes on, he learns that it's actually not a phrase that
to
he
not
use
it. Yeah, that's
it's a theory that's occurred to me as we've been talking.
I like that a lot.
But I also just wanted us to be able to use the phrase sea dog on the pod before we let the chance slip by, because it won't come up again.
Very interesting.
I love it. So I think we'd be remiss. So we've there's been a break in the recording that we talked about last time. There has been like a huge figure in the field of Melville studies unfortunately passed away recently. Meg, did you want to talk to us a bit about this?
Yes. So this man's name was Herschel Parker, and any sort of like literary criticism moment of Melville must pause upon his doorstep to sort of talk about this, the work that he did to kind of bring Melville to the fore in American literature, and then also bring kind of American literature to like capital L literature in the 20th century. I can't tell the full story of the Melville revival because I don't quite know it, but I think that would be sort of interesting to do a deep dive later on. But we can certainly talk about this guy. He was basically an American scholar who was very pro-archives, which makes me very happy. I'm very pro-archives. But there was a field of literary criticism that kind of started to blossom mid-century, sort of in the 60s, in the stage called New Criticism, which put very, very simply eschewed our author biography or like historical context or any documentary evidence to analyze or criticize a work. So sort of if we talk about death of the author is sort of anachronistic, but like that could be something that you could sort of easily, probably a phrase that you've heard before. And Herschel Parker didn't like this. So the titanic work that he would go on to produce, this two-part Herman Melville biography, he went deep into Melville's letters that we could read and like putting together the story of his life, both as something that can be used to read a lot of his works, like Moby-Dick or Billy Budd or White Jacket, etc., or The Confidence Man, sort of those weird sort of later works where you're like, what is going on? And sort of, he was kind of pushing back against the idea that you shouldn't, that there is nothing to be gained from documentary evidence to do either a biography of the author or of their works. So whether or not you agree with that philosophy necessarily, it was interesting that he was pushing back against this sort of one field, and this one field pushed back against him. And then in 2013, he published another book called Melville Biography and Inside Narrative, which is a book about writing the biography. So sort of depending on the kind of nonfiction that you're interested in reading, I think it's fun. You could either read the biography or you can read the journey he took to create that biography, which is both sort of interesting about Herschel Parker and Herman Melville, and what is it like, what is it to write a biography? What kind of different, maybe you and I would just be like, well, you Wikipedia what happened in his life, and then you kind of put it in prose. But there are a lot of different philosophies and sort of like rhetorical approaches to creating that kind of work, and this is the kind that he took. It could be interesting to sort of think. Johnny, I read this section from a biography that, Northwestern University Press, whom he published a lot through, was talking about how he came to Melville. He said he was in school reading a lot of Shakespeare, taking a lot of Shakespeare classes. He came to Moby-Dick, he said, across 11 afternoons. And it says that he was astounded, quote, that a 19th century American, Melville, had read Shakespeare so profoundly, since Shakespeare in that time in America was not quite the dude that he is to us now. So it could be interesting sort of later on to talk about, like, if we talk about Melville, Shakespeare at sort of the middle of that Venn diagram, what was it to be interested in Shakespeare in America in like the 1840s and 50s before the way that we think of him now in school, 800 years later, that this one guy just kind of got into his mind, and then he would go on to he co-edited the Norton Critical Edition of Moby-Dick, so he would go on to become like a titan of Melville, but he did it through being impressed that this author in this work gleaned so much from, not another obscure author, but, this body of work that wouldn't necessarily have been so obvious to us then. And then Herschel Parker was basically just like critical in the 60s and 70s of bringing other American authors to be thought of as like serious literature in a way that maybe even be silly to us to think now that, well, of course, like Fitzgerald is important, but someone had to say that, and he was one of those people.
Yeah, such a loss. Thanks for that, Meg. And we'll see everybody next time when we talk about The Street. See y'all then.
You've been listening to the PequodPod with Tristan Bevel-Marquise, Meg Fanshawe, and Johnny Wiles. Our music is by Lost in the Loop, with sound engineering by Lauren Ayton. The show's artwork is by Delaney Garrett, and Tristan is on the synths. We want to say a big thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. You can join them over at patreon.com/PequodPod for bonus content and for opportunities to help us keep the show running in ship-shape condition. Ratings and reviews also really help us out, so if you enjoy the show, please do express your thoughts and metaphysical yearnings in the review section wherever you're listening to the show. Tell your friends, tell your foes, tell the white whale on whom you're monomaniacally urged to be revenged. It all helps. Thanks for listening, and until next time, call us the Pequod.